Hello, and welcome back to the ministry. And we're talking about the Kingdom Marriage series. This is part two. We went through in part one the female prodigal. Now we're about to go into the male prodigal. So, who is the male prodigal? Well, as you know, remembering from the contents of the story of the prodigal who asked for his father's inheritance, then went off and squandered it in the world, was too embarrassed to come back, ended up serving a farmer and ended up in the pig's slop, and it became too much for him that he said, at least if I go back to my father's house when he had his epiphany, that then I can at least, the Lord will, that my father let me work with the servants at the very least. And the servants get good stuff anyway. So at least if I go back to my father, I'll get something. So he goes back, and as soon as his father sees him coming over the horizon, he comes to meet him. And when he tries to explain himself, his father wants to hear none of it. He takes his dirty robes. He said, go put brand new clothes on him, give him his ring back, blah, 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 blah. And he is feeling all guilty. And the other son sits there and says, but father, how can you do this to him? But about me, I've been here. And he said, you never asked. The prodigal, the male prodigal. Now, as we discuss marriage, we're going to dig a little bit into the males of the story. As you recall, in the story of Ruth, there was Boaz. Boaz was a man of great wealth, but he was not the actual redeemer that was meant to initially take on Ruth as his wife. He ended up deciding to redeem her when the man that was meant to redeem her did not redeem her. He knew that he needed to stand in that gap. His intention was to redeem her. The family thought that he was the one that was initially supposed to redeem her, and the Lord arranged it to be so. But even yet and still, he had his own life, his own lifestyle, and so on and so forth. Now, there's many theories in relation to what the storyline of Boaz was, but Boaz himself was Rahab's son, which means he came out of the lineage of Rahab, who was a prostitute. Okay. And he managed to gain his life and his lifestyle because when Rahab was saved by helping Joshua and his men, they did not destroy the city to where her house was. They allowed her and her family to live. And ergo, that is how Boaz managed to get to that point. Whatever he got, whatever he gained over his lifetime. Now, he had his own trials because, as we notice, he would enjoy his own drink. He enjoyed his own parties and so on and so forth. So he had his own vices, let's say. But if you go forth and you look at Xerxes was king, and Xerxes had a element about him that he presented a certain way, that he paraded his women in a certain way during the parties and so on and so forth. But you came to the understanding that Xerxes, he was more so placed in that position due to his family lineage, and you could tell, depending on which story version you look at, because some movies have Xerxes as very wimpy and others have Xerxes as he was very well guarded and guided by the people around him, but they came off as wimpy. Like, there was one film I saw where they showed the story of Esther on YouTube, that he came off very, very wimpy, cryy, didn't really have any strength, and the people around him that were like his leads, like he had lead commanders that were more inept and aware of what was to be done than him. So when his lead commander was killed, he didn't know what to do because of his weakness, and I'm assuming that they tried to keep him protected because of this. They didn't want anybody to know how weak he was. Now, at the same time, in other versions I've seen that Xerxes was more so portrayed as being strong and had this very strong-willed, able-bodiedness, and he did what he was told to do, but he had a element about him that would become angry, and in his anger, if you pushed him in the wrong way, he would disown you or what have you. So he was one that wasn't to be played with, because he would give you the cold shoulder if he felt that you did him wrong. So I've seen multiple versions of the way that they portrayed Xerxes' character. So even before these men came into alignment with their ordained spouses, they were living a life that they were comfortable with. But the women that came into their lives, they knew that because the Lord showed them, whether it be through dreams, whether it be through what have you method that the Lord used in order to create the favor necessary for them to be aligned with these people, they did not have it before. They were living lives that were not in ordinance to the will of the Lord. With that being said, let's enter into what the male prodigal looks like. Preface. I'm using the outline of a character in a television show that perfectly, I feel, gives the outline of what a prodigal is in multiple dimensions. Reminding you, this is the character of Angel from the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And the way that his character was written could not better outline what a prodigal looks like from start to finish. So, with that being said, the disclaimer is, we are mature children of God. Understand that this is a reference point, and that's what I'm talking about as I use biblical and referential references to show how the kingdom prodigal acts. As I read through it, you're going to see elements of the prodigal. Do not get caught up in the fact of, oh my God, she's talking about this TV show. No, I'm not. You rarely hear me say anything about the actual show unless it's a specific thing that I'm trying to make reference to. I'm going to make either biblical or spiritual references throughout as I display and depict the breakdown of this particular character. Okay. Now that we've got the disclaimer out of the way, let's go into the male prodigal, shall we? Let's begin. First, he had a hard time growing up in a strict household that at the time there were problems, and by this he was the eldest child, so everybody looked at him as a specific way. He may have had siblings that loved him and trusted him, but he was chasing his father's shadow, which made him rebellious in a way. Some God-ordained spouses in their prodigal stage are trying to get away from the image of what their parents thought that they should have been. So they're trying to get away from that. So they may be rebelling against that. He left and went into full rebellion as he was lured away by a Jezebelic Delilah spirit. Pause. Delilah. As we know in the story of Samson, Delilah was the character that lured Samson away from his, I guess you would call her the ordained spouse, and tried to gain all of the information about who he was in order to lure him into giving her all of his strength. She asked him on 3 separate occasions what was the source of his strength. Her whole entire point was to become in control of his strength. Why do I say this? Because the Jezebelic woman that may be, some of y'all's God-ordained spouses, the reason they ain't with you is they got a Jezebelic counterfeit that is holding their weak point hostage to blackmail them to keep them away from you. Now, does that mean that it can't be broken? No, we are God's ordained chosen wives, and we can pray into the fullness of the manifestation of God upon their life, that the Lord's will be done in their life, and that Jezebel will be removed. Because when it's the Lord's will for it, says in the word, what God puts together, let no man put asunder. No Jezebelic woman operating under any Delilah spirit to blackmail or hold hostage any man that is ordained to marry somebody else can stand. Because I literally was listening to Tiffany Montgomery's ministry, and she made the point of saying this. She stated very clearly that it can't withstand the stronghold and the strong arm of God, for it will be destroyed. And if that Jezebelic spirit resists, Lord has the ability that he will take it out, because it is delaying the manifestation of what is called to come to pass in the children of God's life. For when you are delaying God's will, you in a bad place. And he will take the person out, off this planet, out of this world. Okay? So don't be worried about Jezebel. Just pray for your God ordained spouse. Do not pray for them, for the Jezebel to be taken out. Pray mercy over her. Pray mercy over her. Pray mercy. Pray for her to renounce, denounce, come out of alignment, repent, and uproot everything in which she prayed against your relationship. And that the merciful will of the Lord come upon her life. One might think, but why? She's done did all the... No. You got to pray in forgiveness. The Lord will take care of the rest. Because there's a God ordained spouse for that person. They just too demonically activated to come to the realization of God that there's actually somebody for them. Because they're trying to, the spirit on them is trying to keep that man away from you. I don't want to dig too deep into that, but I think I've made my point. And with men, sometimes they will come into this rebellion for years at a time, meaning they will switch between women. They will have 2 or 3 that's their main chicks that they will go between because they safe spots. As per season, they will change the rotation of who these women are. And to me, I don't, I've never been that chick. I never understood it. I was always that person's like, why you need so many people? I was in one relationship with one guy that he messed me up so bad. I was like, you know what? I ain't even dating no more. No. I ain't dating no more. Lord, if you don't tell me who my God ordained spouse is, I guess I'm going to be single and a strong, independent woman, because me, not dealing with it. I ain't out here doing any kind of thing with anybody. It's just not my desire. I don't understand how men can do it. It really boggles my mind when I hear that women do it. But I mean, hey, y'all be out here being prodigals. Y'all just doing what you want with your flesh. That's what your desire is. Let your desire be your desire. But I pray that you find repentance with the Lord. Come into godly covenant and let the Lord heal you. But as it relates that these men, that they may have 2 different women, there may be a consciousness within them. There's going to be a tug of war with God as they are trying to pull themselves out of this form of rebellion, of resistance, as they are resisting, but are being constantly lured in by either the Jezebelic character, which in this context of the TV show would have been the one that he consistently was the one in control over him. And then you had the Delilah character, which was the one that he was messing with aside from. So discovering these things, cutting loose his, cutting loose these things and leaving him with nothing. For years he remained lost. When he eventually, when the prodigal eventually decides to cut loose the ties from these things, he's going to have to go through a season of wilderness where he might be lost and confused, because that was what he knew. And it may even take him a minute, that as he's coming out and the Lord is pulling him towards him, tugging him closer, he's going to go through a period of resistance, desiring to maintain and stay in the confusion in which he was in. But as soon as the Jezebel or Delilah spirit recognizes the God in him, they're going to attack. They're going to fight. Literally fight him. And They may try to either hurt and or harm him to prevent him from leaving them. But if they do not, their own hurts, pains, torments, and turmoils will make them, they'll allow him to leave. But the catch-22 to that is every single time he's in the opportunity to meet someone new, they'll return. So he will go through a season of darkness and confusion in the wilderness as he's trying to find his space with God, keeping him there until he finds a light. As long as he is rebelling against God's desired will for him, he's not going to be able to move forward, nor is he going to be able to go back to where he was. So he may wander for years in the wilderness trying to find himself. Okay? Because until he gives into the light of God, he's going to be dealing with certain issues. Now, the catch-22 to that is when he does give in, he must give in completely. Now, as he's giving in, it may cause for him to still have things that he hasn't quite let go. Some prodigals are going to hold on to some of their vices. Maybe it's liquor. Maybe it's weed. Maybe it's drugs. Whatever it is. Maybe it's talking to the women. He may not be sleeping with them, but he's talking to them. But he's doing something that's out of the will of the Lord, which keeps him swaying between the righteousness of God. And the correct kingdom spouse for him cannot find him. And it will actually almost put a target on his back that when the kingdom spouse sees him, she will be appalled, resistant, and not want to connect because there's a spiritual mark on him until he fully cleanses himself. Now, with that being said, God will allow the God-ordained spouses to come together and not be fully healed. If it's the right timing, they will come to a point that they will complete their healing together. But they must choose to do so. But as long as the male prodigal is still operating in his prodigal state, that may not happen so easily. He must make the decision to clean up his act. And then, when the time is right, he will begin to be allowed to approach his God-ordained spouse. Now, if the God-ordained spouse is in rebellion from his attention from him, he may find it hard and there will be resistance on both ends. With this being said, this will leave an open door or wedge for that Jezebelic Delilah to try to weasel herself back in. Because as soon as I said, the God-ordained spouse comes into the picture, the enemy will always try to bring the counterfeit, which would be the past Jezebelic Delilah spirit, to come to try to test to see if they can open the door again. And this particular person will come forth with a desire and wanting to want the person back, reminding them of all of their past sins, which, as we know, the word states that all of these things are thrown into the sea of forgetfulness. And when you are trying to remind that person of their sins, you are in violation and could potentially be in trouble with the Lord for the mercy of God must be done upon you. So they are actually in danger of the wrath of the Lord by trying to remind this person of their past. So they must in turn, the God ordained spouse, the prodigal male, that as the Jezebel tries to remind them of their past, that his heart is obviously already tied to his ordained spouse, and the Jezebel will come forth in anger because she cannot understand nor explain, and will literally, spiritually start to fight the God ordained spouse. This is why, as women of God, we come to the understanding that there's a fight, that we may actually end up in fights in the spirit against witchcraft that's being sent towards us, probably from the counterfeit that's with our ordained spouse, because they realize, oh no, she praying, oh no, she doing whatever. That means I got to take her out in the spirit. That's when you start to feel the most warfare coming at you, as you really begin to pray into and for your God ordained spouse, because the Jezebel feels it, and she coming to kill you. So these two will end up having an unfair fight to the death, but the God ordained spouse must choose, meaning this prodigal that is in operation of rebellion and disobedience, he must make the choice in this time to destroy the Jezebel and Delilah's spirit by killing it off, in order to truly walk with his ordained spouse. But not a simple woman. Let's see. The woman that he's ordained to be with, that even the jealousy of the Jezebelic spirit trying to remind her, because the Jezebelic spirit that does not want the ordained spouse with the God ordained man, will try to perform and create doubt in order to challenge her, to try and create bait or create the illusion to deter her from the ordained spouse. Anybody notice these types of things? Am I touching anybody's situation? In order to create insecurity and keep them separated. Then with that being said, that they will be a whirlwind that will hold them together. Their love is intense, and their emotions even more. They love hard, they fight hard, and they stand hard. That these things, that even the rebellion and the rampage of these narcissistic forms of sabotage trying to come against them, the power within their love and the hatred that the Jezebelic figures, whether it be the male Jezebel or the female Jezebel, trying to come forth as counterfeits to separate them, can't stand. Some of the most painful things that they will try to do in order to destroy these relationships, so that they can't fully walk in the fullness of what it truly is. Because of the fullness of the obsession that the counterfeit has for the man, that it will only be his ability to destroy her, and him coming into alignment, admitting his love for his ordained spouse. Recently, Michelle, what's her name? Megan Michelle did a video talking about say my name, bae. They have to come into agreement and admit that's the person, that's the identity, that's their ordained person. Let's see. But the male prodigal may still have a bit of fear, so he may start to walk away. There may be resistance, and because the prodigal doesn't feel that he deserves, yet again, or is adequate to be with his ordained spouse, he may resist, rebel, and operate in a different spirit. And in the midst of it, will cause friction between him and his ordained spouse. If he resists, the way to stop this, listen carefully, is the fact that they simply must choose to not allow other people to come between what it is the Lord is building. And in closing to this one, I'm going to say this, that the Lord will ordain your relationship, but you must have a strength and discernment that as the people around you, friends, family, mother, father, sister, brother, whoever it is, they may come against what it is that the Lord is trying to build within this time frame and in this moment. But you have to be able to see it, shoot it down, and come together in communication with your ordained spouse, because if you do not, the enemy will run rampant through the people that are associated with you, speaking into your ears and creating doubt, fear, frustration, and all kinds of stuff to get between you and the person that you're meant to be with. So with that being said, we're going to take a break and we're going to come back in the next part as we come to the second phase of the prodigal in the next video. This is Dodge McCameron for the ministry. Until next time, much love, faith, peace, and blessings.